Hello friends, welcome back to my channel Mukesh English. This is Mukesh Soni. Friends, in this video we are going to have the discussion of the important questions of the 2 marks important questions from the very famous play The Boy Comes Home, written by the famous writer A.A.Milne. So let's begin the questions of 2 marks from the famous play The Boy Comes Home. So the very first question are here. The question number 1. What are the sacrifices that Uncle James claims to have made for the country during the war? Uncle James tells about his sacrifices in a very funny way. He says that he has done his part for the country by giving his nephew to the country, by suffering the shortage of potatoes, and by paying the excess profits tax. Question number 2. What makes Emily tell James that he will find Philip different? So why does she feel that Philip is different? So when Philip went to fight against Germany, he was an immature boy of 19 years old. Aunt Emily is very much impressed and tells Uncle James that Philip is mature and responsible. The war has greatly affected Philip's personality. Before going to the war, he used to do what he was asked to do. Now, he makes his own decisions and nobody can dictate him. Army has taught him something and now he is very much different. Question number 3. What, according to James, Uncle James, has the army not taught Philip? So Philip is not being taught what? The decision-making skills. He has not been taught the decision-making skills. Why is Uncle James annoyed with Philip when they first meet? What changes does he expect in his behavior? Philip is very rude with his uncle. He demands his money before attaining the age of majority, but the uncle refuses to give him the money. Rather, he asks his nephew to join him in his jam business. But Phillips gets so rough with his uncle that he gets a bomb in his threatening. He gets a bomb to threaten his uncle. Question number 5. How does Philip prove that he's 25? Philip claims to have turned 25 when he was attempting to demonstrate to his uncle that he has matured sufficiently to live an independent life on his own. So he proves that he can lead the independent life on his own to show that he is now 25. Question number 6. Is that sort of fair play they teach you in the army? How does Philip respond to Uncle James' query? Philip responds, "Good heavens, of course it is. You don't think that you wait until the other side has got just as many guns as you before you attack. You are really rather lucky. Strictly speaking, I ought to have thrown half a dozen bombs at you first." Taking one out of his pockets, he says, "As it happens, I have only got one." This is how he responds to Uncle James' query. Question number 7. Why does Philip say that coming home after the war itself is like a holiday? He says being in London is like holiday, buying an evening paper, wearing a waistcoat, again, running after bus, anything, it's all holiday. But here, it doesn't seem to him. Question number 8. Why was Philip relieved that the war was over? Because he wanted to pursue what he wanted to do. And the last question, as per the textbook, why does Philip want to sell his revolver? Because there's no use of it in London. So, friends, this is how I have solved the 2 marks questions from the famous play The Boy Comes Home. Hello, friends. In this video, we shall have a discussion of the 5 marks questions from the famous play The Boy Comes Home, written by A.A.Milne. So, let's begin it. And these 5 marks questions, you need to write the answers in a paragraph. So, very first question, comment on the character of Uncle James, or the characterization of Uncle James. Uncle James is an old man with dominating nature. He's the husband of Emily and uncle of Philip. Philip has lost his parents when he was very young. Uncle James and Emily are the guardians of Philip. Uncle James is the man with old belief system As per him, youngsters are not mature and they cannot take their decisions without the help of elders. As he told Philip, saying, all you young boys seem to think you have come back from France to teach us our business. You'll find that it's you who will have to learn, not we. He set strict rules in his house. He is a man with punctuality, and he also forces other members of his house to follow the rules with the same punctuality. All members, including Mrs. Higgins, Mary, and Aunt Emily, they are all ready, but Philip is different. Philip wants to be free from the shackles of watch, a clock, and also from the watch of Uncle James. Dominating the nature of Uncle James can be observed when Emily asks him about the career of Philip, saying, he says, Emily, are you really going to talk it over with him, James, or are you just going to tell him that he must come? James, surprised. What do you mean? What's the difference? Naturally, we shall talk it over first, and naturally, he will fall in with my wishes. So we can observe here two different sides of the character of James before the dream sequence and after the dream sequence. Before the dream sequence, he was quite dominating and also showed that he could convince Philip by the power of purse. And after having a horrible dream about Philip's rebellion, he seems to be very flexible and friendly with Philip. So now we are going to have a discussion on question number two. How does Philip make his uncle obey him? Philip proves himself a mature and responsible man to Aunt Emily by handling Mrs. Higgins and to Uncle James. By relating the incident of Soam, Philip handles Mrs. Higgins, the cook, so successfully that when she leaves, she's speechless. Aunt Emily is very much impressed and tells Uncle James, well, I think that Philip's 4 years out there have made him more of a man. This shows that is quite convinced that Philip is mature and responsible. Uncle James is not ready to give Philip the money left by his father until he is 25. He thinks that Philip is just like a schoolboy. To prove that he is mature enough, Philip relates the event that took place at the Somme during the war, and that makes his uncle to obey Philip. And few more information. It happened that Philip's company was entrenched. The German knew about him. The Germans killed the company commander. After his death, now Philip was the company commander. They had lost about half the company by the time. It was a very difficult situation and he had great responsibility on his shoulders. Lives of many soldiers dependent on him. He took a very mature and responsible decision. He moved the company to the other trench. Then he went back to the CO and told him that he had moved, and this is how he made his uncle obey him after telling this kind of incident or the event at Somme. Question number three. You must not think that after 4 years of war, one has quite the same ideas about the sanctity of human life. How could one? So, what does Philip mean when he says this? Or we can have one more question. Write a short note on the impact of war on Philip. The war had a very profound impact or effect on Philip's personality. Philip was just like any other inexperienced young man before going to war. He's matured into a man now. Before going to war, he used to do what he was told. He is now responsible for his own actions, and no one can tell him what to do. He has learned a few things from his time in the army. He is not the same person he used to be. He has learned how to deal with people now. Mrs. Higgins is taken aback by how well he handles her. He has also learned to use power to his advantage. As a result, we can conclude that the war had a significant impact on Philip's personality. He has matured into a man. He has learned how to deal with people and use force against force. Question number four. One day, if you go on On being unreasonable, the thing will go off. Explain. Philip, taking up the revolver, says to Uncle James that there are about 3 million people in England who know all about bombs and how to throw them. Uncle James responds that he would never dream of letting these things occur to him. Philip considers it useless as there is no detonator. Philip demands Uncle James to hold his hands over his head and say, "Comrade, he may be shooted if he doesn't do the same." Philip, Philip expects that they should go through this little scene again tomorrow. Philip emphasizes to rehearse it every day, and he remarks, if you go on being unreasonable, the thing will go off." Question number 5 with the two questions. So what changes does the war bring to Philip's personality, or how has the war affected Philip's personality? The war has greatly affected Philip's personality. The words spoken by Aunt Emily are very important and meaningful. She says to Uncle James, "Well, I think that Philip's 4 years out there have made him more of a man. He doesn't seem somehow like a boy who can be told what to do. I'm sure they have taught him something." She further says, "You will find him different. Before going to the war, Philip was just like an inexperienced boy. Now he's like a grown up man. Before going to the war, he used to do what he was asked to do. Now he makes his own decisions and nobody can dictate him. Army has taught him something and he is different now. Now he has learned how to handle people. He handles Mrs. Higgins so successfully that she's taken aback. She tells a lie to save her job. When she leaves, she is speechless. At the end, the Philip says that he does not want if he will be any good. At this, Uncle James remarks, "It's your experience in managing and handling men, which I hope will be of value." He has also learned to use power against power. Uncle James threatens to use the power of purse, but suddenly Philip takes out a revolver and levels at him. Uncle James tells Philip that it is not good to settle arguments by force. At this, Philip tells him about war and says, "We used force to put down force. That's what I'm doing now." Therefore, we can say that war has greatly affected Philip's personality. He is now like a grown up man. He has learned to handle people and to use force against force. Question number 6. The play But the Boy Comes Home is about the generation gap. Discuss. It's true that the play is about generation gap. It's very clear from the ideas of Uncle James and Philip. James is the representative of old age or generation, whereas Philip represents young generation. James is a man of rules and regulations. Philip does not like restrictions of any kind. In the play, he shows his free will to do everything. He takes breakfast at 10 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock. He smokes in presence of his uncle. He refuses to go in jam business. His uncle becomes angry after knowing all that. So a conflict is created between these two. So this is a clash of generation. Fortunately, the dream helps Uncle James to become a soft person. He accepts all ideas of Philip and the fight is averted. It stands proof that the play is about generation gap because young generation wants to be free. Question number 7. The importance of dream scene or the importance of dream in the play The Boy Comes Home. Very important question. In the play The Boy Comes Home, Philip returns to his uncle's house after a 4-year absence. There, he is welcomed by the strict adherence to his uncle's irrational rules. Philip's father has passed away, and Uncle James is now his guardian. Uncle James wishes to discuss Philip's future with him on his first meeting following his arrival. Uncle is an old-fashioned man with traditional views on how to treat young children. He believes he can order Phillips to do whatever he wants. He's a very short-statured man with an unimpressive physical appearance, but he has cocooned himself in a severity. His inner weakness clashes with his outward severity, causing him to have a strange dream. So, what is a dream? So before his unconscious fear and insecurity, he dreams Philip as a rude and bullying boy who tries to get his demands met with the threat of a gun. So what is a dream? He dreams that he has put the revolver over his head. His nightmare is filled with violence and threats. He sees himself completely subjugated in the face of his arrogant nephew's terrorization and use of weapons. He imagines Philip as a brazen and impertinent man who will go to any length, any extent. Uncle James is so engrossed in his dream that he's unable to recognize that it is merely a fantasy. Uncle is negatively influenced by the dream. When Phillips speaks to him in real life, he acts in a very kind and very considerable manner in order to avoid the menacing situation of his dream, where in the dream where um, Philip threatens his uncle to kill him by his revolver. Uncle James' conscious and unconscious mind merge to form his dream, which then directs his subsequent real attitude. For a variety of reasons, the dream sequence is crucial in the play. The boy comes home. The first and the foremost important reason is that it appears very awkward and immoral for a nephew to point a revolver at his uncle and force him to kneel and beg for his life. That is why the author used a dream sequence to describe this awkward and immoral situation. He convinces the reader that everything has happened in a dream and that he should not take it seriously. Secondly, we see that the dream sequence puts an end to the feud between Philip and Uncle James. Uncle James' commanding demeanor and strict discipline irritate Philip. He would like to live somewhere else. He wants his money and wants to learn a trade. Uncle James, on the other hand, does not want to give him the money until he is 25. Uncle James appears to be a different man after his dream. There's no longer any conflict between these two persons. He has matured into a rational being. He now understands the issues confronting today's youth. Question number 8. Why does Philip say he has turned 25? Philip claims to have turned 25 when he was attempting to demonstrate to his uncle that he has matured sufficiently to live an independent life on his own. This conversation occurs when Uncle James refuses to give Philip the allowances, or rather, the inheritance left behind by Philip's father before his death, which was kept under Uncle James' guardianship with the clear instruction that it should be given when Philip turns 25. Now, Philip must have gone through physical and emotional turmoil during the long 4-year war in France with the Germans, making difficult decisions and taking lives. In some ways, we can be certain that Philip eventually matured as a true man as a result of his experiences as a leader to his troops and setting examples on numerous occasions when taking command of a life or death situation. The horrors of war clearly shaped Master Philip into a young but true man who has witnessed the extremes of what a man can do to another man on the battlefield. So this makes him to say that he has turned now 25 and he should get his property, which he has the complete right. Question number 9. Comment on the title of the play The Boy Comes Home, the most important question. A.A.Milne was journalist and became the editor of Punch at the age of 24. On the outbreak of war in 1914, he entered the army. In his leisure time, he used to write light-hearted comic plays. The title of A.A.Milne's play, The Boy Comes Home, refers to a boy who has turned home after long absence. The boy happens the boy happens to be Philip, a young British soldier who has been fighting in France. He's a very promising young man with a strong and pleasant personality. He's 23 years old and has learned a lot from his wartime experience. His personality has matured and he's unaffected by any situation. When he returns home, he finds himself at odds with his guardian's strict personality and his unbending rules at home. The entire plot revolves around the conversation, how he handles the conversation with his uncle. This conversation occurs as frequently in reality as it does in Uncle James' dreams. Uncle James' insecurity and the sense of inadequacy in front of a young man compel him to succumb to his nephew's demands, to bow down to his nephew's demand. Question number 10 we have here. Discuss the breakfast episode, the most important question. In the beginning of the play, the boy comes home. Philip wakes up late in the morning. Philip wakes up late in the morning because he had just returned home the night before. He summons the parlor maid, Mary, and requests that she bring him breakfast. Mary informs him that the breakfast was cleared away an hour ago. Philip claims that he's aware of it, which is why he has called her. He orders 2 eggs and ham, as well as coffee rather than tea. Mary pauses and says she is not sure what Mrs. Higgins will say. Mary informs him that breakfast at 8 a.m. is still the rule in this house, just as it was before when he went to war. Philip says with a smile, with a very smile, Philip says with a smile that he did a lot of stupid things before going to war. Aunt Emily enters after Mary leaves. She's a gentlewoman who never asserts herself. She discusses general she discusses general topics with Philip. Mary returns and informs Aunt Emily that Mrs. Higgins wishes to see her. Philip immediately steps in and asks Mary to inform Mrs. Higgins to come there. Aunt Emily pauses and says, I'm not sure what Mrs. Higgins will say. Philip says cheerfully that he wants to know what she will say once and for all. An extremely aggressive lady enters and talks to Philip in a domineering manner, telling him that she will not make any breakfast after 8 a.m. Philip addresses her in a commanding tone and instructs her to prepare breakfast. She demands that he demands that she should be given an advance notice of the implementation of new rule in the home. She demands that she should be given the very advanced notice to implement such a new rule in the home. Philip gives her wages instead of notice and tells her she can leave at any time. This is a successful strategy and she is greatly intimidated. Finally, she says, if it's just a little breakfast, I don't say, but what I might not get if I asked decently. This episode establishes the tone for the entire play for demonstrating the strength of Philip's personality. Furthermore, it also demonstrates that no one will be able to force him to agree to his or her wishes. So that's a breakfast episode. Question number 11. Write a short note on Uncle James' dream. So these are the extra questions. In the play, the boy comes home. Philip returns to his uncle's house after a 4-year absence. There, he is welcomed by the strict adherence to his uncle's irrational rules. Philip's father has passed away, and Uncle James is now his guardian. Uncle James wishes to discuss Philip's future with him on the first morning following his arrival. Uncle is an old fashioned man with traditional views on how to treat young children. He believes he can order Philip to do whatever he wants. He's a short statured man with an unimpressive physical appearance, but he has cocooned himself in a severity. His inner weakness clashes with his outward severity, causing him to have a strange dream. Because of his unconscious fear and insecurity, he sees Philip as a rude and bullying boy who tries to get his demands met with the threat of a gun. His nightmare is filled with violence and threats. He sees himself completely subjugated in the face of his arrogant nephew's terrorization and use of weapons. He imagines Philip as a brazen and impertinent man who will go to any length or any extent. Uncle James is so engrossed in his dream that he's unable to recognize that it's merely a fantasy. Uncle is negatively influenced by the dream, and when Philip speaks to him in real life, he acts in a very kind and considerate manner in order to avoid the menacing situation of his dream. Uncle James' conscious and unconscious mind merge to form his dream, which later directs his subsequent real attitude. Question number 12. What were Uncle James' expectations for Philip? So, what does he expect from Philip? Uncle James is Philip's guardian in the play The Boy Comes Home. He tries to sway his decision about his future. Uncle James is a very traditional person who does not allow others to express themselves. His servants and his wife have all completely obeyed his orders. That's why he expects Philip to act similarly. The boy is a very strong and decisive individual who cannot be led by his nose. As a result, his uncle's expectations of him are unfounded. This is something he is aware of subconsciously because in his dream he sees Philip as a rude and violent boy, but the boy is not like this. His uncle imagines him as a stubborn and haughty man, but he immediately agrees to his uncle's suggestion. So Uncle James' expectations are flimsy and unfounded. They all turn out to be incorrect. All of these expectations expose his own metal triangles and frailties. He bullies Philip into joining his business, believing that he will refuse. Then he imagines himself as a violent rug. Philip, on the other hand, does not live up to any kind of expectations and proves to be a sensible boy with proper manners. So it all has happened because of the dream. Otherwise, Uncle always wanted that Philip should join his jam business. The last question for 5 marks, this is again an extra question. Write a short note on the incident of Somme, the battlefield. So it happened at Somme, the front which Philip's company was to attack the next day. They were in a trench. The Germans knew about them. Therefore, they were firing at them. The company commander wanted to move from that place. He asked his CO about that. The CO ordered them to stay there and wait until the next day. Later, the Germans killed the company commander. After his death, now Philip was the company commander. He knew something about scouting too. Therefore, he found another trench that was better than the first one. He sent two men, one after the another, to ask if he could move that trench. However, they did not come back. They had lost about half the company by the time. Now, Philip had three options. Firstly, he might stay there and wait until the next day. Secondly, he might move to that other trench against order. Thirdly, he might go back himself and explain the situation to the CO. It was very difficult situation. He had great responsibility on his shoulders at that time. Lives of many soldiers dependent on him. he took a very mature decision and responsible decision. He moved the company to the other trench. Then he went back to the CEO and told him that he had moved. After that, he went back to the company again. So this is the battlefield scene, the scene incident at Somme. So this is how I have tried to solve the 5 marks question. Thank you so much. Hello friends, in this video we shall have a discussion of the important 10 marks questions from the famous play The Boy Comes Home, written by A.A.Milne, and these questions answers should be written in one page or maximum 2 pages. So we have here question number 1, the character sketch of Uncle James, or the character sketch of Philip, or effects of war on Philip's character, or how does Philip prove himself a mature and responsible man, or compare and contrast the characters of Uncle James and Philip. All these questions in single answer. So let's begin it. Philip. Philip is the central character in the play The Boy Comes Home. The whole play is about the decision of his future career. He has heroic qualities. He has served in the army and has got the qualities of a typical army man. Therefore, he has learnt manners and etiquettes. Philip stands for the young generation. On the other hand, Uncle James stands for the authoritative values. Philip has charming and dominating personality. He has 4 years of experience of war. He gets up late for breakfast and does not follow any principles of discipline. Philip is a young man of 23. He has a dominating personality. He has a strong willpower and determination. When Mrs. Higgins, the cook, refuses to give him the breakfast, he at once takes the decision and dismisses her with 1 month's salary. He is bold, courageous, fearless, and undaunted. He is humanist at heart, but he does not allow others to take any undue advantage of his politeness. At last he succeeds in suppressing the undue authority of Uncle James. At once he decides not to terrify him any longer and declares that he is willing to join his jam business. He uses his physical force in order to put down his uncle's force of money. To conclude, it can be mentioned that the character of Philip shows that the young are capable of doing their work. So Philip stands for those who are confident and bold in their life. Now, Uncle James character. Uncle James is the second important character in the play The Boy Comes Home. He's an aged person. He is an authoritative and dictatorial, both by nature and temperament. Uncle James believes in the old traditions and the values of life, and he has a full command over his servants and the members of the family. Uncle James dislikes Philip's taking the breakfast late. He asks him to be punctual. He also he also forbids him to smoke without the permission of his aunt Emily. He says James is an authoritative and dictatorial. He real both by nature and temperament. When Philip demands his uncle of the money which his father left, he refuses to give him money. He wants to enjoy the advantages of being a guardian of Philip. He is of the view that he is still not mature enough to settle. Uncle James tries his best to compel Philip to accept his proposal to join his jam business, but all in vain. As soon as Uncle James takes out his revolver, as soon as Philip takes out his revolver from his pocket and aims at him, he's terrified and accepts Philip's demand for handing over to him his late father's money. Thus, Uncle James refuses to give him money, and it causes a row of conflict between them. Uncle James plays the role of a villain in the play. He wants to impose his authority on him. He shows his authoritative and dictatorial nature. The playwright has given us a lesson that the elders should not use their undue authority against the youth. We should provide them full chances so that they can show the talent and the worth in life. Question number 2. What is the importance of dream or the dream scene in the play The Boy Comes Home? The dream scene in the play The Boy Comes Home is of great significance. Philip does not pay attention to his uncle's advice. He reacts against his uncle's dictatorial nature or dictatorial nature. He tells him that he cannot live with him any longer and demands from him the money which his late father had left for him. Uncle James refuses to give him money until he becomes 25 or he reaches the age of 25 because he's just now 23, 2 years to wait. In the dream, Uncle James threatens him to use the force of the money against him. Upon this, Philip takes out his revolver to suppress the force of money. He points the revolver at James. He tells him that it has killed 20 Germans and it does not matter if it kills one more Englishman. Then he takes out a bomb from his pocket. James is terrified at this. Philip puts the bomb into his pocket, telling James, "We will rehearse and enjoy it every day." At last, he succeeds in suppressing the undue authority of James. He at once decides not to terrify him any longer. Finally, he declares that he is willing to join his jam business. So, at the end of the dream, James is bewildered, very confused. Upon this, James feels relief. He offers Philip a post in the management of his business of jam. James says about his dream he will never be quite certain about it. So here the play comes to an end. Was it a dream or wasn't it? In short, the dream scene makes the play interesting. Through the dream scene, the real personality of James comes to the surface. After this, he is completely changed person. In fact, the conflict is resolved through this dream only. The dream resolved the conflict. Question number 3. Discuss the play The Boy Comes Home as an anti-war comedy or explain the comic elements in the play. So that's very important play. The important question. So what is the scope of comedy in the play? The play The Boy Comes Home is a very light comedy. Very first, we find comic element at the start of the play. Philip comes down for breakfast at 10 o'clock, whereas the breakfast is served at 8 o'clock. Philip asks Mary, the parlor maid, to bring breakfast. Mary tries to frighten him, saying that, "I'm sure I don't know what Mrs. Higgins will say." She starts repeating this sentence, and this sentence creates a lot of humor. Mrs. Higgins comes and shows her anger. However, Philip handles her so artfully that she has to tell a lie to save her job. She says, "Who said anything about going?" There's a great difference between how she comes and goes. This situation is very funny and makes us laugh. Secondly, Uncle James tells about his sacrifice in a very funny way. He says that he has done his part for the country by giving his nephew to the country, by suffering the shortage of potatoes, and by paying the excess profits tax. His claims are very funny. Thirdly, in the dream sequence, Philip talks about choosing a career. He says, "If I'm 4 years behind, so is everybody else." After the dream, Uncle James repeats the same words. He says, "Well, if you are 4 years behind, so is everybody else." So this is funny. So these are the comic elements in the play The Boy Comes Home. So at the end of the play, Uncle James' condition creates a lot of comedy when he laughs with a forced heartiness. Philip says about the strict manager, and he says, "Perhaps I would better bring my revolver." At this, Uncle James says, "Ha ha, a good joke that. Ha ha, a good joke, but only a joke, of course." So therefore, the play is full of comic elements, anti-war comedy. Question number 4, very important question. Explain the main conflict in the play. Generation gap or the conflict. The first conflict between Philip and Uncle James is that Philip does not like Uncle James' authoritative authoritative type attitude and his strict discipline in the house. Philip says to Uncle James, "Well, we don't get on too well together." So in the play, the boy comes home, authoritative attitude of Uncle James is seen. He treats Philip as an inexperienced schoolboy. He thinks that he will decide everything for Philip. He says to Emily, "I have decided that the best thing he can do is to come into the business at once." He further says, "He will fall in with my wishes." He's ready to use his authority as a patron. Aunt Emily asks him to let Philip decide his career. However, he says he may, but I don't see what he proposes to do it so long as I hold the purse strings. So this is what he has in his mind when he calls Philip. He just wants to tell Philip about his decision. Secondly, Philip wants the money left by his father to learn some profession. However, Uncle James does not want to give him the money until he is 25 because he is 23 now. Philip does not like it and says, "Look here, Uncle James, do you really think that you can treat me like a boy who just left school?" Uncle James tells Philip that he will use the power of purse if he does not submit to his orders. Then Philip uses the power of a revolver and bomb. He frightens Uncle James to death, and Uncle James is ready to do what Philip wants. Therefore, these are the conflicts between Philip and Uncle James. It's only the dream scene which resolves this conflict between uncle and his nephew, Philip and Uncle James. Last question, and that's the extra question which I thought to add here because that's going to give you a brief glimpse of the overall play here. The boy comes home. Okay, before that, let me tell you, I have also done the summary of the whole play, so you can go through the link of the summary in the description. So, write the critical analysis of the play, The Boy Comes Home. The Boy Comes Home, written by A.A.Milne, is genuinely humorous and satirical play with a cleverly constructed plot and skillfully characteristic. In this story, Uncle James has done his duty for the country by giving his nephew for his country and also supplying jam to the army to earn his living. According to his uncle, Philip allows at 8 sharp Philip is allowed at 8 sharp in the house. Aunt Emily thinks that Philip may not be able to sleep because he should get up early in the army for breakfast. Philip did not spend his vacation with his uncle and aunt because they are not gay people. Philip deals strictly with Mrs. Higgins by giving further orders to prepare breakfast of coffee, jam, and 2 eggs and hamburger, if any. When Mrs. Higgins wishes to give a month's notice, Philip told her to dismiss her from her services and she can go at once, taking 12 months' pay amount, £45 per month instead of notice. Philip can be independent and able to do whatever he likes after the age of 25, and he can also ask for his own money that was given by his father. Aunt Emily thinks that the army has taught Philip and they have made more of a man, and he does not seem like a boy who can be told what to do. But Uncle James considers that the army has not taught Philip to decide upon the most suitable career for a young man in his future, so that he wants to talk with Philip to know of his future aim. James has also decided to make Philip involved in making into his jam business, or Philip can do any business according to his taste. Philip did not smoke in the house because, according to James, he has to take aunt's permission to smoke. Once Philip was in a trench on the border of a wood with his soldier friends. The company commander sent back to ask if they could move. Unluckily, the commander was killed. Then Philip became the company commander. At the time in the battle, there was an intelligent question to give order to move, hang on, or to go. back. But Philip gave the order to move. This experience made him feel older than his age. In Uncle James' dream, Philip does not want to enter the jam business because it does not happen to appeal him, but he wants to be an architect. That he would like to pursue the profession of architect. Philip next offers his argument that once he annoyed his brigadier, he was covered with a red face and with about 20 medals. He was angry with Philip for about 20 minutes while he stood on attention, so that Uncle James is not so impressive than his brigadier. Uncle intends to use his authority on Philip by saying that Philip should be able to earn his living and obey his order. But Philip was a young man. He returns from the war after 4 years due to his father's death. His uncle James looks after him. James wants to give him his property only when he turns up 25. When he returns from the army, he demands his property. He wants to start his career in a new way as wanting to be an architect. He would like to be an architect. But James tells him that he gives his property when he will be 25 according to the agreement. Being a disciplined person, he wants to make Philip involved in his business and wants to control him. On hearing these things, Philip brings out his revolver and points at him. He says that he has killed about 20 Germans. Philip make Philip make plan to save himself from the charge of murder by saying that he will take the plea that he has killed him accidentally and it will be the purest accident. He threatens his uncle by saying that he will kill him if he will not agree with him. He also shows a bomb to James. In this way, he gets the upper hand of James and made him agree. Philip returns from the war and in a habit of killing enemies by pointing them. It's not unusual to him to kill other people because it will make no difference, for his attitude towards human life has changed, because it was no change in one's ideas about the sanctity of human life after the war. That means the war has changed humans' mentality after a very differently. But in real life, when James looks Philip's pocket in horror because he thinks that Philip is bringing out the bomb to kill him by showing him a revolver and threatening to murder him, but he got there his smoking pipe. So now we can say that Philip has gained bitter experience while he was in army. He does not need his revolver anymore because he is going to start a new life adopting James' business, that's jam business. James plans to utilize Philip in business, introducing him to the manager and making expert in solving the business problems. That's why he is not going to wear the uniform of a soldier anymore. So this is how I have tried to solve the 10 marks questions. So dear friends, wish you good luck for the examination and also watch all my videos of 2 marks, 5 marks in the 10 marks questions. And also go through the description box where I have done the summary of this play in a detailed manner. Please see the links of all the lessons in the description box. Thank you so much.